All Better Show. I'm your host, Paul Vogelzang.
You gentlemen are making a big mistake.
This here is Mr. Thurgood Marshall. Man is an attorney. You will treat him with the respect that he deserves.
October 2nd, 2017 is the 50th anniversary of Justice Thurgood Marshall's swearing in as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. He was the court's 96th Justice and the first African American to hold a seat on the Supreme Court. Justice Marshall had a monumentally successful career arguing before the Supreme Court. As President Johnson then noted, Marshall is already in the front ranks of the great lawyers of this generation. He has argued 32 cases before the Supreme Court. He has won 29 of them, and that is a batting average of 900. As a matter of fact, and many in our Not Old Better audience will recall, President Lyndon Johnson announced Marshall's nomination to the court on June 13th, 1967, the day after the court in the Loving versus Virginia case struck down Virginia's anti-miscegenation law, the last major vestige of the racial apartheid era. We reviewed the movie Loving last year with many of you commenting having enjoyed it, so there are parallels in time and space here with the film Marshall. This film, though, takes place before Thurgood Marshall began serving on the Supreme Court, when Marshall served as the go-to trial lawyer for the NAACP. Lots of parallels in music, and you're listening to some swing music right now, and the music from Marshall is excellent, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go through quickly the plot, and since so many in our Not Old Better audience are aware, I'll move really quickly through this. In Marshall, it's 1941, and Thurgood Marshall, played by Chadwick Boseman, who is fantastic in this, is working as a trial lawyer for the NAACP, as I just mentioned. He's sent to Connecticut to defend Joseph Spell, who's played by Sterling K. Brown, the star of This Is Us, who's a black man working as a chauffeur who stands accused of raping his employer, a white woman named Eleanor Sturbing, played by Kate Hudson. Spell is further accused of driving her to a bridge, throwing her into the water, and pelting her with stones, but he maintains his innocence on all charges. Once in Connecticut, and due to issues of race in the courtroom, Marshall enlists the aid of local Jewish lawyer Sam Friedman, played by Josh Gad, who's excellent in this too, who has only handled insurance claims previously, not something like a death penalty case. The odds look tough, and they get tougher when the judge, played by James Cromwell, rules that Marshall won't be allowed to speak in court because of race in the courtroom. Not to mention that if Marshall loses this case, again, he's the go-to guy for the NAACP. The NAACP could be shut down. And hanging over everything is this huge question of the case. Is Spell actually innocent? These and other questions are answered by this excellent film. And film it is. I say that emphatically because many will suggest that this is an important film, as though it's educational or even euphemistically not entertaining. Absolutely on the contrary. Yes, this is important, absolutely. Just as the Loving film was important. But that film and this film, Marshall, are entertaining with a capital E. Marshall is a courtroom thriller akin to other similarly paced legal films, but Marshall is also a comedy, which, frankly, surprised and delighted me. Historical courtroom dramas aren't usually described as laugh riots, so I think audiences seeing this might be a little shocked. Certainly I was caught off guard by this, and again, the film is very funny. I read that director Reginald Hudlin, who has traveled the country hosting early screenings, which is basically what I saw over the weekend. Reginald Hudlin said, I get this backhanded compliment like, I know that I was going to like it, but I didn't know that I was going to like it like. I like that line. I think viewers are going to simply assume that they're going to get this history lesson biopic about another quote-unquote great man. And I think Marshall, the man, had to have a sense of humor and be self-deprecating. In one of the movie's many disarmingly funny scenes, Marshall tells Friedman a very personal story, admitting to losing a testicle during an accident. Of all the real-life stories that I've read about Marshall in my research of this piece and the movie, this is the one that surprised me most. Again, Marshall, the man, had wit, a sense of humor, his joie de vivre, and his courage, and going into these towns representing the NAACP was evident in the film and wonderful. Regarding comedy, too, I remembered that Reginald Hudlin, the director, got his start in comedy. He directed The Ladies' Man, Boomerang, and that beloved 1990, again, my audience, not all better audience is going to remember this, that 1990 cult hit, House Party, which he also wrote. But in recent years, he's become a prolific television director, including plenty of work on dramas. Now he gets to do a little of everything, taking what you might call kind of the hidden figures approach to history by putting as much emphasis, again, on entertaining, with a capital E, audiences as educating them. So there's a combination here, but certainly the movie is wonderful on its own. Another delight, and certainly one of the film's most intriguing qualities, I thought, is the way that it shows how power and respect vary depending on what room you're in and who's in it with you. Marshall confidently heads to Bridgeport, Connecticut to represent Spell, again, played by Sterling K. Brown, in this important case of murder, as if Marshall is wearing this invisible cape, like he's Superman, but in court, in the city jail, at home with his wife Buster, played by Keisha Sharp, and in these Harlem night spots throughout the film with cultural giants, he's diminished by his own choice or even against his will, and we perceive him differently, and he perceives himself differently. So that's a really interesting part of this film, I thought. When Marshall, during the film, is face-to-face with, brawny white men who just hate him on sight, the movie sharply, I think, reminds us that there are situations where college degrees aren't worth the paper they're printed on. A less frightening, but equally dispiriting scene finds Marshall speaking to a black lawyer in Bridgeport who passed the bar, but was denied a license to practice law because of this courtroom issue of race.
My great-granddaddy, he was a slave. We're not slaves now, are we? We've got weapons we didn't have before. We've got the law.
My review, absolutely, positively high on this film. While, Marshall might not possess the originality or the requisite amount of surprising twists and turns. I mean, this is a biopic, after all, that's really going to make this huge impact. Again, it's very entertaining, but it's so unwavering in its intent to showcase this idea of prejudice that African Americans and Jews have suffered over the last century, that you'd have to be incredibly callous not to be affected by this film, especially since it is buoyed by an incredible cast, which enhanced the biopic, and they're able to make even the entirely predictable, this notion of all this predictability teem with drama and charisma. Those of you that are somehow yet to be charmed or convinced by Chadwick Boseman, who's played some other great biopic parts, will have no more excuses after watching Marshall. He's a force of nature. He's confident. He just, you see this confidence just ooze throughout the film, and the patter and partnership with Josh Gad is really particularly impressive and wonderful. My kudos go to Sterling K. Brown. I love him in This Is Us too, who's able to make Joseph Spell rich and complex despite a brief amount of screen time. Reginald Hudlin's sleek direction meshes perfectly with Boseman's confidence too, and it helps to glide over Marshall's shortcomings, which ultimately make for this lively and more palatable experience. When you look at his whole life, it's so full of adventures and achievement that you really can't make a 2-hour movie out of Marshall, and Thurgood Marshall specifically. It's really more of a miniseries. When we talk about film, we talk about the historical importance here on the Not Old Better show, because that's what we all relate to. But I think sometimes what gets lost in this conversation is that it's really, in particular, these movies are really fun, and this one is that. People, I think, are going to laugh a lot more than they think they're going to laugh. They get a little choked up, too, and then there's even some parts where there's some cheering that might really take place naturally, in a kind of a very unforced, unprompted way. I think it's a surprisingly good date movie for those of you who are interested in taking your lovely partners out. I don't want people to go because they feel an obligation to support the movie again, or feel like this is, somehow an important film, or that they're going to go learn something. I think you should go and expect to have a good time. And you will. I think you'll actually get some insights into this man that you might not expect. But, first and foremost, again, this is entertainment, and I think that's what Marshall is really going to deliver. And I think you're really going to enjoy this.
You just sweep through town, stirring up all kinds of ugliness. My life is on the line here.
Hey, Attorney Friedman, hold on a minute.
What do you want?
You're one of us now, Sam. A real fighter.
Step away, you can't take the heat on the battleground.
Neither of them have been telling us the truth.
He attacked me.
I'd advise him to accept the deal.
You lied in a sworn statement. Why would you do that?
Why'd I lie? Because the truth gets me killed.
You can't deny me now. Tunnel vision.
If you want freedom,
Have me down on a mission.
you're gonna have to fight for it.
Stop me now.
The only way to get through a bigot's door was to break it down.
You can't stop me now.
If you have to see one film this coming weekend or week, with your significant other, I think you should place this film on your must-see list for fall. I wholeheartedly recommend Marshall. As the title suggests, the movie is about Thurgood Marshall. He's this iconic civil rights attorney for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, who used the courtroom to break racial barriers and help decimate institutionalized Jim Crow when he won the 1954 Supreme Court decision in Brown v. Board of Education, a landmark case which declared state laws that established segregation in schools to be unconstitutional. So all of this wonderful history. But it's fitting that this movie is being released on the 50th anniversary of Marshall being named the first Black Supreme Court Justice. I think you'll love it. It's a majestic film. Yes, it's important, but wow, it is entertaining. Well, as usual, we will post links to everything. You'll get some images. Of course, I've had a chance to play the trailer right up front. And as usual, my thanks go to you, the listeners, for joining me today. Your time is valuable, and I'm grateful you're spending some of that with me today. I'm always interested in feedback. You can leave that at iTunes, Google Play. Send me an email at info@notold-better.com. That's info@notold-better.com. Stay tuned for our next show, another great one, as we talk about better. The Not Old Better Show. Thanks to all.